Order online at picassospizza.net.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to this Train Wreck Sports Podcast, where we are here to pay the bills. It is January 27th, 2026, and the Buffalo Bills have hired their next head coach, and his name is a familiar one. It's Joe Brady. The offensive coordinator has been, I guess, hired, promoted, whatever you want to say. He's the head man now. Announced earlier today. We're going to break it down here on the pod. Jake Micah joined by Mike Partham and Mike Bunt. We've all got a lot of thoughts. Let's start with you, Bunt. What was your immediate reaction and thoughts on the news of the hiring of Joe Brady as the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills?
I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I did not expect Joe Brady to actually have consideration for this job, but not because he wasn't deserving, but more so because I knew the PR side of this would be absolutely awful. After promoting Brandon Beane, you promote Joe Brady. I knew it would be a storm of negativity throughout Bills Mafia, throughout the national media, throughout the local media. And that is exactly what we have seen on social media and everywhere this afternoon since that news came out. Now, what I will say, in some ways, this is the simplest thing in the world. And then in other ways, this is one of the most complicated things in the world. If we're being real, there's a lot of layers to hiring Joe Brady as a head coach. But some of what you have to look into, why this decision was made, and what this means is, number one, this is an indictment against Sean McDermott. You literally got fired as head coach, and the staff and your general manager didn't even go out of house to hire a new head coach. He promoted a guy within, which means internally, the front office and ownership thought that Joe Brady was a better guy for the job than the guy they had in-house for the last 9 years, which tells you internally, Sean McDermott might not have been as liked by several individuals in power as what we previously thought. Number two, this is all the indications of a Josh Allen hire. I'm not saying he made the final decision, but he definitely had input in the process, and this shows that Josh wanted somebody that he knew he was comfortable with and that he had a prior existing relationship with, and those are both things he has with Joe Brady. And here's the number three thing that we need to really talk about, and I don't think enough stuff is getting discussed about it. Sean McDermott has total power within the Bills organization. He influenced moves from the front office, and he influenced play calling on both sides of the ball. It was clear defensively in the playoffs and elimination in games that mattered where they get eliminated that the defense didn't step up. We already know the stats in those instances, but we don't talk about how much he might have influenced offensive play calling. When Joe Brady was hired as OC on an interim basis, it came after Ken Dorsey was fired because the Bills were turning the ball over and losing games because of those turnovers. They had one of the best advanced metrics in the league, but they kept losing games that their turnovers played a role. They were 6-6. What happened when Joe Brady becomes the OC? They win the last 5 games of the year, run a heavy approach. They make the playoffs. They win the division. The very next year, Josh Allen wins MVP. The Bills' run game is dynamic, and they get within one drive of an AFC championship. This year, they get a rushing champ. They scored 28 points a game. The year before, 30.8. Their efficiency numbers are through the roof. We have been talking for years about how it is harder to have defensive-minded head coaches because offensive-minded, if you have an offensive coordinator, they get blocked. But if you have an offensive-minded head coach, you can have a defensive coordinator that's good stay on your staff forever because they just don't get taken away as often. If we're being real, this is the Bills acknowledging that they think that Joe Brady is that offensive mind, that they want running this ship for the long term. They like his relationship with Josh Allen, and they feel comfortable getting anyone that can change the defense. This was really about let's keep our continuity offensively while switching what we need to do defensively. A lot of people on the outside are looking at this as this is a continuation of what you did with McDermott, and that's why it doesn't make sense to them. What they don't understand is hiring Joe Brady is anything but a continuation of Sean McDermott. If anything, it shows that Sean McDermott and Joe Brady probably had differences of opinions on a lot of different things. And what I think you're going to see going forward is you're going to see a drastically different defensive scheme for the Buffalo Bills in the very near future. And if add a receiver, we're going to know what the Bills really are offensively next year. Because say they get an Alec Pierce or they get an A.J. Brown, and then you start seeing the Bills 50+%, 55%, then we're going to know Joe Brady didn't want to run the ball 55%, but that was part of the head coach saying, do it my way or you're not here. And let's be real, there was a lot of that in the Bills organization under McDermott. I love McDermott. He was a great head coach. He is a great head coach. But how much have we heard about people that when they don't do things McDermott's way, there's friction? We've now heard about it with Brandon Beane. We've heard about it with Leslie Frazier. We've heard about it with their special teams coordinator. We've heard about it with several players in the past. You were either loyal to McDermott and he rewarded you with loyalty to you, or you spoke up and you got in his bad graces and then he would move on from you. This strikes me as the organization is basically admitting that was the way we ran. McDermott had total authority, and that's not the way we want to go going forward because it hasn't worked.
And for all the guys that were coming out and saying, posting Instagram pictures saying WTF or I don't know what the hell is going on, we have, if you haven't noticed lately, one Jerry Hughes, not so much in his own tweets, but in replies to other people's tweets, basically just crashing out on McDermott saying, yeah, after 13 seconds, some of us were basically done with him. He took no accountability. It was basically his call, and then he would blame other head coaches on the staff, saying we all know things that came out in the Ty Dunn article. And Ty Dunn has basically come out recently saying, well, he wasn't bringing it up to them, but they were bringing it back up to him saying, yeah, we never got over 13 seconds. And apparently for all of the improvements in his maybe demeanor and style that McDermott may have tried to make, he was still the same guy essentially. And it rubbed a lot of people, as Bunt was saying, the wrong way, and never really turned over a new leaf as a coach, maybe just on the surface, but in essence was still the same guy.
Great point.
A lot of things. Yeah, absolutely. Let's look no further than the Josh Allen relationship. If we're being real, the things that Tyler Dunn said are things that I've had people inside the Bills tell me, that Josh respected Sean McDermott because he's obviously a great head coach and has won a lot. And he was the only head coach Josh Allen's ever had. So Josh is a stand-up individual. He's not going to create problems. He goes along with it. But let's be real. When looking at their interactions, did they ever look like two people that were close to each other outside of football? No, and I'm not saying you need to have that. You definitely don't need to have that. But McDermott runs a very structured ship. He's a very, I don't want to say authoritarian type guy, but he's a guy that likes doing things his way. And Josh, in a lot of big moments, sometimes would look a little tense. That's an indictment of the head coach. If anything, they're getting him a head coach that he can be looser, be more himself, and not have to try to be something else. And you could say that's a good thing. You could say it's a bad thing. None of us really know at this point in time. But the point of it is Josh Allen's turning 30 years old this, I think, May. And it was time to make a change if you believe in the future. And as much as we want to say Grant Udinski should have been the guy, or Clint Kubiak, or Davis Webb, or Brian Dable, let's be real on all these candidates. If this was not the Bills' job and this was another random job in the league, nobody would be hating on Joe Brady being the hire here. This is because Joe Brady's in Buffalo and fans don't like that he runs the ball so much with an MVP quarterback, and they're tired of the wide receiver screens and other things like that. Not acknowledging that Ben Johnson, who's considered a coaching prodigy in Chicago, does the same wide receiver screens, runs the ball just as much in certain situations. You watch Joe Brady, you watch Ben Johnson, you look at a lot of similarities. One's considered a prodigy, the other one's considered why did you hire him as a head coach right now? He's already failed in the NFL. He's 20-40 in his NFL career. It's probably one reason why the Bills didn't actually hire him for this position. You look at Udinski, he's 30 years old. He would be the youngest NFL head coach in the history of the league. Were the Bills ready to make that leap? Probably not. Davis Webb, the highest he's ever been, is a quarterback coach. Were they ready to give the reins to someone that hasn't even been a coordinator yet in the league? There was a lot of questions about these other guys. They were all intriguing candidates. But at the end of the day, Josh played a role in this. And I think it's going to be kind of hypocritical where a lot of fans are saying, give Josh whatever he wants. And then you give Josh what he wants. And then we complain about it. It's like, let's just be real. Like, this was a Josh Allen hire, regardless of what gets reported out there. And if Joe Brady focuses on the offense and he hires a guy like Jim Leonard to take care of the defense, is it really that much worse than what we were looking at any of the last 3 years? And the last thing I'll say before turning it to the rest of you guys, and I'll chime in a little bit later, this is also admitting that the Bills feel like internally they screwed up by not promoting Brian Dable years ago. This is them admitting everything the Tyler Dunn pieces is correct. Because think about it. Tyler Dunn said there's people inside the Bills organization that feel that if McDermott was gone after 13 seconds, they might have had a Super Bowl or 2 by this point. What are they saying? They're saying if we would have promoted our offensive genius that we had in Brian Dable, we could have won it with another defensive mind because our own defensive mind wasn't good enough. So if we just had the same offense and a better defense, we would have won one. So this is them basically saying, we're not going to make the same mistake again, but we can't go with Dable because he's already screwed up once. So we're going to go with the other guy in the building.
Before you chime in, Carson, I just want to highlight a comment here by Sword Brother Jose, basically saying, so what changes? Nothing. I think what Bruce Nolan's perspective here that he gives on Twitter is a good way to look at it. That Brady was a Dable Bean guy when he was hired as a quarterback coach initially. Allen stumped for him, but he's not a direct McDermott tree hire. So it's not necessarily, and obviously the little snide remarks, maybe he shouldn't get so cute. And to be fair, at times we all agreed with him as far as, the bubble screens and other, sort of cute plays, as we would call them, on certain third or fourth down situations, maybe that Brady was running and Sean McDermott seemingly didn't quite approve of. But maybe it was that because that's McDermott's what he wanted the offense to be. Is that a result of the personnel that was available to him that McDermott was mandating that he wanted certain guys here and there? We're going to have to find that out once they start bringing in new players and maybe letting go of some old ones and start taking the field and running more plays again. But I think it's important to know, as Bunt's been saying, this isn't necessarily in-step hire. They're basically saying McDermott had a certain philosophy and it wasn't shared by his coordinators or the offensive or defensive staffs. And this isn't necessarily a continuation. It's a refreshing. And I wouldn't say do continuity for continuity's sake. You do continuity when you win. Well, the Bills have been winning, just not winning enough to get where they want to go. So I guess this is the best argument as any for continuity. Back in the day, people were saying, well, let's keep our head coach for 2 or 3 or 4 years during the drought because maybe they'll actually, get around to winning one time. Well, if your continuity is losing, then you're doing nothing but spinning your tires. The Bills have been successful in the regular season. They just need to get over a hump in the playoffs. And I think keeping continuity when you have a great quarterback and a relatively successful franchise isn't as bad as an argument as some might say it out to be, doing it for its own sake. But anyway, Carson, what's your perspective? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll start with this. I think the hire doesn't surprise me so much as probably other people. When you look at the perspective of Joe Brady, even if McDermott, I think, did have a role in what the offense was called, I think that's kind of a definite. We saw that directly after Ken Dorsey was fired. The offense was still pretty good. You look at most metrics when it comes to yards per game, points per game, like they were getting the job done. He led Josh Allen. He was the play caller when Josh Allen had an MVP year last year. The league's top-ranked rushing attack now for 2 years in a row. The accolades are there with Joe Brady. His track record kind of speaks for itself. Yeah, they do things a little bit differently, and the fact that they run the ball at the top 3 highest rate in the NFL. They do a lot of horizontal stretches when it comes to their passing game, like Parthy talked about when it came to bubbles, a lot of motions, all stuff like that. And yeah, they probably could use play action a little bit more, and they could take some more shots down the field. But you look at the hand Joe Brady was dealt, and a lot of what he was calling are concepts that help receivers that struggle to create separation on their own, create separation, mesh plays. That right there, that's difficult for the defensive guard when everybody's crossing one another. We saw a variety of different pick plays. We saw him adopt a little bit of a different strategy towards the end with some newer concepts with a fake guard pull, and you have a tight end cross over the middle. And then the list goes on with Joe Brady. I think he's a tremendous coordinator. I know a lot of people would probably disagree with that, but at the end of the day, this team has been the closest with this everybody eats mantra to making the Super Bowl in 2 of their last 3 seasons. You look at it this year, the same caliber opponents that typically are there, the Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, those teams that we are a little bit of afraid of. I shouldn't say afraid, but they make you a little bit nervous. They're intimidating. They weren't there. The Bills, they beat Denver. You never know what can happen. Like that felt like they were right there and probably could have beaten New England. We've seen it happen before. Last year, they lose in the AFC Championship off of a variety of factors. You could look at the Kincaid drop. You can look at the offside, or excuse me, the play they didn't give Allen the first down and the quarterback sneak. Like, they're right there. They're knocking on the doorstep. And I guess for ownership, they just felt like McDermott wasn't going to get them over the hump. And if I would have fired McDermott, I don't know if I would have stayed within the organization, but I do understand the reasoning. I think Joe Brady's one heck of a football mind. You look at when he was back at LSU, and I get, hey, like they had a team that right there that was just for the all-time ages in 2019 LSU. Still, they revolutionized the game and the concepts that he used. You look at him back, he's from the Sean Payton coaching tree, was at William & Mary a little bit as a GA. Like, his background is there and his resume is there. Yeah, he's a younger guy, but he's got familiarity with Josh in this offense. You look at the trends that they've set in the NFL when they bring big personnel in, whether that's Alec Anderson a year ago, Reggie Gilliam, Jackson Hawes now. Just what they do is set trends. We always talk about, well, can you be first over that hump without it failing? We looked at KC, their 3 straight Super Bowl runs and how they were able to do that. Well, the Bills have kind of set that up. Other teams have started to adopt the heavy personnel. Let's run the ball a little bit more. Let's add some more weight on the field. And without a doubt, the Bills have played a role in that and how they've successfully been able to create their offense. And another thing, before I pass it back to you, to whoever wants to talk, I guess, but he has limited Josh Allen's turnovers to tenfold. Before Josh came here with Dable, he struggled with turnovers. With Ken Dorsey, he certainly struggled with turnovers. He's found a way to keep Josh Allen, and it's clear that they love to run, but he's found a way to keep Josh Allen away from giving games away and games that they should win. Because when you really think about it, the Bills, when they lose, it's because they beat themselves 9 times out of 10. Turnovers is how they lost against Denver. Turnovers is how they've lost several games this past season. And turnovers is how they've shot themselves in the foot in years past. So with Joe Brady, it's an efficient economic offense. I'd say that's fine with 4 yards of play. It's not an offense that's going to stretch the field. Will we see that maybe a little bit here in next season with him as the head coach? Who knows? Will he even be calling the plays next year on offense? Who knows? We'll find out a little bit more, I'm assuming, at noon. I believe Thursday when he has his press conference. But at the end of the day, I'm fine with the Joe Brady hire. Personally, I don't love it, but I do like it. I'd say I'm about an 8 out of 10 on the approval rating scale. I think he's a brilliant mind, and hopefully the Bills can take that next step.
Joe Brady will continue to call offensive plays as the new head coach of the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, that just came through.
Bunt, I know you only have a few. Bunt, I know you only have a few minutes left, so I want to throw this back to you. Among all the criticisms that people might have about Joe Brady's play calling, one of them is the predictability of it, even to the point where opposing defenses after the games would say, man, these guys were just so easy to figure out. How do you interpret that going forward with Joe Brady possibly being still being a play caller or even just being the head coach?
So I don't know if Carson's still with me, but I think Carson would agree with what I'm about to say.
I am.
If the play's working, there's nothing wrong with continuing to run the play. Like, it doesn't matter if the defense knows what you're doing. All that matters is, are you successful doing it? And the Bills kept running plays that they would pound and pound and pound. What a lot of people don't understand with the Kyle Shanahan and the Mike Shanahan running concepts is that it's really a very basic concept. It's like the same 3 to 4 runs that you run over and over and over again. But you know what the strength of it is? When you're going to the outside, you have the ability, you give the running back the ability to attack whatever gap he wants to. So what defenses are saying, like TJ Watt saying that against the Bills, fans are misinterpreting. Fans are saying, oh, well, you're just letting the defense know what you're doing. No, you're giving the running back, who you believe is one of the most explosive players in the game, the option to attack his poison. And that's why James Cook led the league in rushing this year. That's why James Cook gets the explosives. And it's I don't mean this as a criticism, but that's how you can tell who knows football and who doesn't know football. Because this stuff is not like something that's unique just to the Bills. Like, Kyle Shanahan can run the same running play 20 times in a game and get 200 yards and like 8 yards a carry. So to me, it's not the end of the world. Now, if they're running the same pass play over and over and over and again, okay, maybe they're probably going to eventually throw an interception. But it depends on what you're doing. And like, this is the big thing too. I think a lot of people look at Joe Brady and they see what he's doing and they're like, well, why does he run the wide receiver screens? But then you look at the data and the wide receiver screens, they're one of the most efficient teams in the NFL doing it, despite double the volume. The wide receiver screens are used by the Bills a lot as an extension of the run game.
Yep.
Belief in the receiver's ability to go vertical, so they have to spread teams out by going horizontal. This is just basic math and geometry. You have to open the field up one way or another, whether that be running the ball or by going horizontal to spread teams out to take your passing game respectable. So there's a lot to this. And then if we dig deeper too, let's look into something. So when Sean McDermott comes to Buffalo, he first has Rick Dennison as an offensive coordinator. Then he goes to Brian Daboll. He has issues with Brian Daboll, so then he brings in Ken Dorsey, who was the quarterback's coach, who Josh Allen loves. Then Ken Dorsey gets fired. Joe Brady becomes the offensive coordinator, who Josh Allen also loves. Do you know what these hires, Ken Dorsey and Joe Brady, have in common? It's not only were they liked by Josh Allen and they were young, but think about it. You have a control freak head coach who wants total power. And you just had all these arguments with Brian Daboll to the point where Brian Daboll's saying stuff to people like, I'm leaving this organization, even if I don't get a head coaching job. Why do you think he goes with the Ken Dorsey then? It's not because Josh Allen's vouching for Ken Dorsey. It's because Ken Dorsey is going to be a first-time offensive coordinator for you. I don't know if he was a coordinator elsewhere, but basically he has no power. Who has the power? The head coach. The head coach tells the coordinator what to do in that situation. Then what happens when you get Joe Brady and Bobby Babbitt after Leslie Frazier's gone? So like McDermott called plays for a year, and then Bobby Babbitt's in. Why would you want Bobby Babbitt and Joe Brady to be your coordinators?
Joe was an offensive coordinator back at he's got a pass.
No, I know Joe Brady was in Carolina, but I'm talking about young coordinator overall who was quarterback's coach. Those are hires a head coach has when he's thinking about, I want control.
Yeah.
They're going to do what I want them to do. If Sean McDermott wanted the best defensive mind, he would have hired somebody with a lot more experience. But what would have happened when that defensive coordinator tells Sean McDermott, I don't think nickel's the way to go right now. This team's going to expose us. That guy would have a shit fit with McDermott. They're going to go at it. What happens when Sean McDermott's like, we need complementary in football. We need to run the ball more. And then the offense coordinator's like, I want to throw the ball 45 times in this game. They're going to have problems. He fired yes men. That's what Brady and Babbage were hired to do whatever Sean McDermott told them to do. But the fact of it is, Joe Brady has a little bit more out there. Why was it all regular season? The Bills' offense is struggling against good defenses on the road. And I know they turned it over 5 times against Denver. But then they go against Denver, a defense that just held New England to 10 points. And let's be real, it was really more like 3 points because they gift-wrapped the touchdown off of a turnover. What did the Bills do against Denver? 450 yards and 30 points with 5 turnovers. And guess what the Bills started doing once they got Brandon Cooks? Throwing the ball downfield. Yes, you have some controversial calls. You have some bad drops. If Joe Brady can make the passing game open up with Brandon Cooks at 31, 32 years old as his number one receiver, what can he do if you give him a 26-year-old with some wheels? What can he do if you give him an Alec Pierce? Like, I'll tell you this. I got to go to the Sabres game in Toronto. Go Buffalo. Let's get a win against the Maple Leafs.
John asked, why are you in the car? That's why he's in the car. He's going to the game in 20 minutes.
Where are you going, bud? The game's about a half hour.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I'm in a hotel parking lot. It's a 5-minute walk. I'll get there easily. I was there last night for Raw also. I got to see a championship match. It was a great time in Toronto. I love this city. But
so
what I'm going to say is this. You get Alec Pierce on this Bills team. Like, you get Alec Pierce on this Bills team with the running game they already have, with the tight ends that they have, and you add Alec Pierce to Shakir, and maybe you draft another wideout in the third round, second round. I think this Bills offense could be one of the scariest offenses in the league because Alec Pierce is one of those deep ball guys where he's going to go up and he's going to get it, and he's also going to get separation. And I think Josh Allen's biggest problem in his game is his lack of a deep ball. But it's also because he hasn't had guys that can really separate and make the plays downfield. You get that to Allen where, like, he doesn't need to throw it perfect to make those completions. This offense could score 30 points a game, and you switch to, like, whatever, if you get Jim Leonard in whatever defense he wants to run, I think you're looking at a team that will be less predictable and tougher to stop in big moments. I think this is Joe. Everybody talks about extension of McDermott. Joe Brady is the exact opposite personality of McDermott.
Yeah.
His vibe, he is loose. He is down to earth. He's dabbing guys up pregame. Like, he's not faking snow angels in front of a camera to look good. He's fucking just dabbing people up because that's what he's doing. Joe Brady is Josh Allen's personality, but as a head coach, if we're being real. Joe Brady is chill like that. If you were saying, what is Joe Brady's personality? He's a dog. That's what he is. That's why Josh Allen and him are so close. They're barking at one another. They're going to have good moments. They're going to have some bad moments. But what I'm saying is this: this offense is going to look a little bit different next year. There's going to be a lot of similarities, but it's going to look a little different. I would not be surprised to see a major swing at receiver. And this defense, if I'm anybody on the defense, I'm ready. I'm getting my papers, getting ready to say goodbye, because I think half this defense is gone next year. I think the linebackers better start worrying about their jobs. I think the defensive linemen should be worrying about their jobs. The only people that are safe on this defense are Christian Benford, Maxwell Harrison, and Cole Bishop, and everybody else. I mean, obviously obviously not Daquan, but the
Daquan seems like he's.
Yeah, not Daquan. I was talking about the rookie D lineman out of Kentucky. There's going to be a lot of changes soon.
Absolutely. All right, Mike, go enjoy the Sabres game. We'll wrap it up here. Go Swords, go Saves, whatever you want to say here. Yeah, great stuff. I mean, we'll go a couple more minutes here, guys, and then wrap up. But I think you guys all make a lot of points. Carson, I'm kind of in line with you. I don't know. You said like an 8. 8 is like a really like move to me in our rate. We can work the minutia out after of our scale and then figure that out. Yeah. I'm like the same as you though. I was fine with it. My initial reaction was like, oh no, mostly because I knew the reaction that was forthcoming, especially from my little brother who the other day said if they hire Joe Brady, I'm going to stop watching the Bills. So that's the strong opinions I deal with. So it's going to be fun talking Bills with my family for the next year or however many years.
Until they win.
Yeah, until he proves something along the lines there. But that's where I was. I was like, I'm completely with you where I'm fine. I like the move and I understand how they got here. I said to my dad on the phone the other day too, the interviews first came out. They had Brady right away, which is easy. He's around. He's in the office, whatever. And then it was Dable and Anarumo. And I'm like, what if that's just the staff they want? and they told us with the first 3 people, like, this is our dream staff. This is ideally what we would do. We'd have Anarumo as our DC. We'd have Dable as our OC and Brady as our head guy. And that's what we want to go for. And then somebody else mentioned in here about the kabuki theater of all the interviews. I think they went into this knowing Brady was probably going to be the guy, but did their due diligence to see if someone could blow them away. And maybe Udinski was close to that. And that's where that steam kind of came up in the last day after the interview with him and just the excitement around something new and everything like that. Those are all risks too. I think this was the safer play, going with someone whether it's something that we're going to deliberate, I'm sure, all summer long, all next year about how much of this move was made, and bringing Brady in and also the firing of McDermott was just made because they just think McDermott is the problem, and how much is really going to change about this organization. But Partham, I like what you said about the continuity, because I think great organizations do try to keep continuity. I think Terry Pegula believes that, hence why Kevin Adams had a job for many, many years. And I know, Carson, we have a Kevin Adams defender in here, so I'm not going to throw a bunch of shade on it. But I think there is something to good organizations try to maintain continuity when they can. And this is something where you see exactly where Terry his line of thinking is. All right, if the issue is just McDermott, if I think that I have a McDermott issue and nothing else, then why would I change up all this other stuff that's been working really well? As you guys have been talking about, the offense has been in a good place. It's not maybe the passing game, maybe the personnel is not what we want it to be, but it's been in a great place for what that offers. And that something that has been mentioned a couple different times. Let me find the exact quote here, but from the insiders, who I'm assuming the NFL Network insiders are being more Brandon Beane PR than anything else right now. Another reference from today, the quote being, I think this was in Jordan Schultz's tweet too, understanding the relationship between personnel and coaching. That has been mentioned multiple times today when talking about what this move is. So that has to speak right to Sean McDermott too, right? And I think Mike's right in the fact that it seems like with the way this roster looks, especially defensively, that McDermott had his hand in a lot of the personnel decisions and who they were going after and everything else there. Now, the wide receiver position, again, something we'll probably talk about and deliberate for all summer and all into next year. McDermott was also clamoring for something, talking about Jacoby Myers and everything else going into the season when he was talking about that. So that is the biggest question when it comes to Brady is what does he want offensively from his personnel? What is he going to look like? What's going to be different? Is there going to be anything different next year? Is it based on his personnel, or is this kind of the offense that he wants to run? Those are all things that they're going to answer and happen. But Joe Brady overall, just if you take it out, I think Mike put it nicely when he said that. I don't know if you were here, Carson, where if he was getting hired by any other team today, they'd be talking about how great of a hire it is and that he's a great offensive mind. And Joe Brady was the Ben Johnson before Ben Johnson. After that year with LSU, everybody was like, this guy's going to be the next guy. He is primed for it. He has that kind of brain and everything else. And we're used to it. And there are things that when you get used to a coach, especially an offensive coach, there's certain tendencies that you start to dislike. There's certain tendencies that just annoy you as fans and everything else. I think the screen passes fall into that, even if there's a lot of good and a lot of reasons. And also with the screen passes, a lot of teams in the NFL and just all of football, if you're watching a college football game, they're running those screens all the time too. So it's just something that these offenses kind of do now, but it feels like the safe move. And I think, I was talking about this with TV show endings, like Stranger Things just ended a while ago. And just how people nowadays in our culture, we have so much access to information and we get out to see everybody's theories and everybody's choose your own adventures and everything, that you get all the possibilities worked up in your head. And then when the thing happens and it's not exactly how you perceived it or, thought it was going to play out, you get upset, right? That's the normal thing. You're watching a TV show. Oh my God, Game of Thrones. Oh my gosh, I think it's going to end this way. It doesn't end anything like you as that was the worst thing ever. It's maybe Game of Thrones might have been the worst thing, but
I was about to say,
yeah, that one might have been the wrong example to use, but you know what I mean, right? That people they fantasy book, they make up things in their mind of how they think it's going to go and then get upset when it doesn't happen. And I feel like that's a lot of the reaction today too.
Throw in Star Wars fans for that too.
Yes, absolutely that. I just think that's part of it, Parthy. I think that part of it is people got excited about. I was one of them. Got excited about Grant Udinski. People got excited about the possibility of bringing Brian Dable back because they wanted him back beforehand. There were some people that were excited about the possibility of a Davis Webb and just that relationship with Josh Allen or whoever else your preferred candidate was. And I think that when you go with the guy that was already here and is kind of, for lack of a better words, the boring option, right? We're not getting, there's no newness to this. I guess there is newness, but on the surface, it's same old. We've seen this guy. We know this guy. We already have opinions about him. I think that affected the reaction a lot to anything else, to ultimately, which is not the most inspired hire, maybe that's the wrong word, but probably the right play in this moment for a team that should be looking for stability because there's a lot of good in the organization that you want to continue to work to, keep going
Jake,
with.
The whole part of this is, as far as how the fans are receiving it, it's PR. It's political spin because the reason everybody's, as you said, was anticipating Udinski or Webb or anybody else, or maybe waiting for a Kubiak was, it's a fresh mind. It's a new take that we got to get in the building because we got to, fumigate all the old stuff out of it too. And as we were just going over with me and Bunt pointing out how Brady's more of a Dable, Bean, Allen sort of guy and not a McDermott tree hire. The perception is that because he was the offensive coordinator under McDermott for the last couple of years, that he's a McDermott guy. But, with all the little, reading between the lines in press conferences and other things of that nature, reports that are now coming out, it's meant to, and it should give you the impression that they weren't in lockstep with each other. So even though it's an in-house hire, it's still the fresh offensive mind that we've all been asking for, just not from the outside perspective. So I mean, being in owner Terry Pagula didn't do it in the most polite, in a very awkward way, but they basically tried to, in so many words, throw McDermott under the bus while thanking him on the way out. And I think Joe Brady's a little bit more diplomatic than that. I don't think he's going to go into this press conference in a couple of days and basically say, yeah, Sean was telling me to do all this stuff, and I just basically did what he told me, but now I got my own stuff, and we're going to forget all that. Maybe he'll say something to those effects that you can sort of read between the lines of again, but not like in a way where, I wasn't the guy who picked Keon and so on, and things of that nature. So, and with all these other reports and the reports coming out of how Brady knocked it out of the park as far as the CEO part of the head coaching position, which, let's keep in mind, as much as, he's the offensive guy, head coaching is more of a CEO than a play caller. He might take the play caller duties for maybe a year if nobody floats his boat as far as picking an OC in this round of hires goes. I mean, McDermott was the defensive play caller for a year or so before he brought on another defensive play caller after Leslie Frazier, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe Joe Brady goes that route, holds the offensive clipboard for a year, and then goes into the next coaching hire and says, let me get somebody else to take this off my hands now that I got all these coaching duties to attend to.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how he handles. It's not just the offensive game plan anymore. There's so many more other, avenues that he's going to have to control when it comes to time management, personnel usage, seeing things, and obviously he's going to have to communicate with all his guys. So that's going to be something I'm going to look out for. And I'm really excited to see what he has to say in his press conference. I think it's going to be more of the same, but I think Bunt did bring up a really, really good point before I, joined. And I did think about this earlier. If he got a job with anybody else, there's some serious hype around Joe Brady and what he can do and what he provides. Youthful guy, the resume's there. He has had a plethora of success. So yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this one turns out. I do think, some people are going to have a little bit of wishful thinking, but at the end of the day, we haven't seen him play, so we're going to have to stay optimistic about this. I know a lot of people are going to try to rip him down. I think there's 85% of people that disapproved on one of my Twitter posts on an approval rating thing of this hire. So they're going to have to prove a lot of people wrong, but you win a few games, and I think a lot of that gets thrown out the window. And at the end of the day, that's all outside stuff. And all that really matters is what happens in that locker room. I think a lot of guys really do respect Joe Brady and what he does and his personality. So we'll have to find out how this one goes, but I'm excited for it. It's tough to see McDermott go, but at the end of the day, I think, there was no way I could convince myself, and I think a few other people would agree with this, that if we ran it back next year with everything the same, obviously you have free agency in the draft, but there's no way I could feel confidently next year saying, okay, this year is going to be different. This is our year. I've seen it so many times now. It's like, okay, something had to give, and it turned out to be Sean McDermott. So we'll have to see how this one turns out. I mean, a lot of big offseason ahead, I think, for Bean and obviously Joe Brady, and how they're going to communicate and what they're going to do defensively with the defensive staff and just staff in general. And we'll have to see if this one is the offseason that's enough to get the Bills over the hump, because they certainly have a lot of things right now that I think they have circled and they're going to have to evaluate.
Well, they can start out next season, coming out in the new stadium and winning a few games, but at this point, we've seen them win a few games in September and dominate the regular season. It's in that sense, it's not going to be entirely different from seasons past. We know they're going to win. We know with Josh Allen alone, they're going to win 10 to 12 games, maybe more, hopefully more, maybe get a number one seed for a change. But until they get to January and they get past the 2-7 wild card round and whoever they might have to face there, whether they're on the road or at home, whether they've won the division title or not, once they get into the divisional round and they get back into that jungle, that's where the true test is going to be. And that's where the true evaluation of Joe Brady is going to start. It's not going to be fair to judge him on 1 year succeeding McDermott, but that's where his legacy is going to be defined, not unlike Sean McDermott's. And the other thing is, as far as Joe Brady's differences with Sean McDermott, Evan Washburn of CBS was on One Bills Live saying, yeah, Joe Brady has an energy, but it's different than Sean McDermott, as I believe Bunt was alluding to. McDermott seems to be a little more wound up tight, and Joe is a little bit more, loose and free and things of that nature, especially coming from the offensive side of it. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I think whatever Joe Brady has to say in this press conference, and people noting the differences between how he talks and how Sean talks is going to be the first indication of how different they are, and hopefully that'll start to assuage everybody's fears, including my own initially when I heard the decision to hire him. Uh, that's going to be, obviously, winning the PR battle is not the whole battle. We can talk about all the times Rex Ryan entertained people and won the PR battles, as opposed to the awkwardness we just had with Bean and the owner, and what did that really turn into. The battles are won in the field, not in the PR or impressors. But as far as toning down everybody from about to jump off ledges like they're what was that kid? What was that Lannister kid that basically fell off the ledge in Game of Thrones? Mentioning that, by the way, because that's what few people were tweeting out gifs of upon hearing Joe Brady was hired. But even though PR is not the entire battle, I think it's nice and it's important to a certain degree to calm people down and say, hey, this is not going to be more of the same.
For sure. I think that this is something, and Steve's great here. He's always a great supporter, so thank you, Steve. But I want to rebut this just a little bit, because the Super Bowl winning roster, we've been talking about the roster all year long, and we all agree that it could have been better, that there are holes on it, that it was a flawed roster and everything else. But that being said, I think it's still reasonable to believe that this was a potentially Super Bowl, at least an AFC winning roster, because they were in overtime against the number 1 seed and had 5 turnovers in that game, had every chance to win that game. And then we saw what New England's offense was able, like Bunt said, we saw what New England's offense was able to do against Denver just a week after the Bills with 5 turnovers were able to light up that team. So I want the roster to be, I think there are plenty of holes on this roster that need to be addressed and everything else. But they're right there. Like this is a team that's right there. This is a move to get pushed over the edge. There was clearly, at least the organization thinks there's one thing that was standing in their way, and it was Sean McDermott. But this is an organization that thinks they're right there and has been right there for years. So I don't. It's not a Super Bowl winning roster because they haven't won a Super Bowl. But we can't also act like they're just a bunch of bums out there when when they were in it with the 1 seed, and it would have, and we all would, if they would have beaten Denver, we all would have had them having a chance to beat New England. I still think if they were on the field with New England this Sunday with whatever, they get a money in the bank chance to cash in to make a thing like that, they would have a chance to win that game too, with Joe Brady as the head, whatever it may be. So I just think it's been over. I think the reaction, and I think that's what my main takeaway. The reaction has been very emotional. Everybody's still hurt. The scars are the wounds are still fresh, not only from the Bills losing their own matchup, McDermott getting fired, and everybody dealing with that fallout and falling on whatever side that they want to go from. New England then making the Super Bowl, which everybody feels some type of way about, with that specific team making it in this specific year, and then having a hire of a guy where a lot of fans were excited about other possibilities. I just think there's still a lot of fresh wounds that people need to get over, and that this is in a top tier it has been a top tier organization over the last couple of years, and we'll see if they're banking on this continuity and the staff that's all been there, and Josh Allen being able to keep that afloat. It's not a bad bet. I want to leave with this, but if you guys have one last thing before you go, you can jump in. This is from Football Stats Guy. At Stick to the Model. He's got Carson. I see you follow him. He
I follow a lot of people.
You do follow a lot of people, but your name pops right up here. In 2016, the Falcons were a tier 1 NFL team. Matt Ryan was MVP. Kyle Shanahan calling plays. Dan Quinn is the culture builder. They reached the Super Bowl. We obviously know how that game went. Afterwards, the Falcons kept Dan Quinn, let Shanahan walk. Shanahan went to the 49ers, built a modern NFL powerhouse. No Super Bowls yet. Also no Josh Allen, though. The Falcons, years of resets, coaching changes, no clear direction. And then he says, let this be a case study for Buffalo. Brady is a hot commodity, helped Allen win his MVP, was interviewing with multiple teams. The Bills chose to keep him in-house. Atlanta let the future leave. Buffalo didn't. And I think that that's the best, simplest comparison point that I could see and for optimism out of this. Because if you think that guy has that kind of talent and has that kind of mind, they clearly brought him in because they think he has that kind of talent, have that kind of mind to be able to work with Allen and everything else, then maybe this will turn into the sliding glass door moment that unlocks the Bills' potential going forward. But that being said, do you guys have any other thoughts before we get out of here and go watch a very exciting Tuesday night Sabres game in Toronto?
Yeah, I think just, it's still, we're what, a week ago our season ended in a crippling fashion once again. I think a lot of people are up in arms, and when they saw Sean McDermott fired and the reasons and how it was done a little bit, I think people got extremely irritated with that. And just to kind of see somebody who wasn't, I think Joe Brady was a hero last offseason. Like, people loved him, and then after this year, he kind of lived with the phrase. He lived long enough to see himself turn into a little bit of a villain in Buffalo. And I also would like to point out, when Brian Daboll left, a lot of people had issues with Brian Daboll too. And I know a lot of people forget about that and act like Brian Daboll was some, glorified guy who was just tremendous. He never had a bad play call and he was perfect. People had a lot of issues with Brian Daboll too. This happens every single time. People loved Ken Dorsey taking over the reins before the Bills actually played with him as offensive coordinator. It started off hot and then things kind of fell apart. It's just interesting to me how the whole PR perspective kind of transpires with how people view Joe Brady, and the results are so there, and people sometimes fail to ignore that. Hopefully that can continue. Time's only going to tell if this is a good move or not. But one thing's for certain, they're going to have to nail this offseason. They don't have a ton of cap space. They're going to have to do a lot of restructuring, maybe a cap casualty here or two. They're going to have to make a lot of decisions on who they bring back. They have a huge free agent pool that they're going to have to make decisions on when it comes to their own guys, and then obviously free agency in itself, along with the draft. But one thing's for certain, I think the pressure has slowly started to build over time with, playoffs starting to fail and with every year playoff failure. And I think they've seen enough, and Joe Brady's going to be the guy that they believe in to get the Bills over the hump. So time's only going to tell on that. He definitely has, without a doubt, there's pressure when the expectations are Super Bowl every year. And whether or not they can live up to that, I think is just more than Joe Brady. I think collectively it comes down to the players, the front office, and ownership included as well.
It would be nice on this press conference in a couple of days if Joe Brady were to address all these mesh concepts and the wide receiver screens, especially on third and longs. However successful they were, more so than other teams, it's not something that usually a downfield passing attack with a caliber quarterback like Josh Allen would usually do. Especially, and me and others have addressed this in the past. When you do that, you're essentially taking the ball out of Josh Allen's hands to do a plan B, scramble, run, get the first down with your legs type deal. So all these cutesy plays that people have been pointing out, even Sean McDermott himself. I hope Joe Brady can address those concerns a little bit more directly now that he's the head honcho and he doesn't have to answer to Sean and couch his words, so to speak, and maybe say, with a different philosophy on personnel and bring in different kinds of talent, maybe they can have a different offensive philosophy going forward. Hopefully.
We'll see. It's a brand new world. And we're gonna learn a lot together as the off season goes on and the type of players the Bills bring in. As training camp gets started, and we get the first look at what this new look Bills team will start to look like. And then as the season starts, it's going to be really interesting. But like you said, Mike, it's really probably just going to come down to if they're another game divisional weekend, whether we think this is a good move or not. So we have a long time until then, but we'll be here with you along the way. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsor, Picasso's Pizza. Get your Picasso's Pizza in Western New York and anywhere nationwide at picassospizza.net. For Mike Partham, for Carson Hayek, for Mike Bunt, who joined us earlier on, this is Jake Micah. Enjoy your night. Go Sabres and go Bills. I promise, guys, the sun's coming up tomorrow, even as Joe Brady is head coach. So let's all embrace it and have a great offseason going forward from here.